All right, Mayor, we are now live.
Thank you. Hello and welcome everybody to this City Council discussion only special meeting. Thank you for joining us today. Will the clerk please call the roll? And I would remind council members of our new policy regarding virtual meetings.
Councilmember Babcock.
Present, and in East Lansing, Michigan, Ingham County. Thank you.
Councilmember Bacon.
Present, East Lansing, Michigan, Clinton County.
Councilmember Watson.
Present, virtually, East Lansing, Michigan.
Mayor Pro Tem Gregg.
Present, attending virtually from East Lansing, Ingham County.
Mayor Stevens.
Present and attending virtually from East Lansing, Michigan, Ingham County. Thank you very much. Our next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion on this?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Wonderful. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilmember Babcock. Any discussion? All right. Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Wonderful. Our next communication from the audience, with a caveat under that there are written communications as well attached to this agenda. Emily, would you please mind letting in anyone from the audience that wishes to speak? I will put a caveat out there and saying I have not been great at this in the past, but I will be cutting folks off at 5 minutes from now on. It's unfair to really parse that out. I'm a person that wants to let everybody say their piece, and it is more difficult for me to cut folks off because I feel like they should be able to. But we do have rules in place, and it's unfair for me to be putting those out there differently. So I will be cutting folks off at 5 minutes specifically. Emily, do you have anybody in our audience?
All right, caller with a phone number ending in 534. You are now permitted to address council.
Hi, this is Ann Hill at 6885 Buteo. I'd like to comment tonight on the request for PA 328 personal property tax exemption for TechSmith Corporation. I'm opposed to granting such a request, not only for TechSmith, but for other corporations, companies, or nonprofit organizations that may in the future seek tax exemptions from the city. As you are aware, over the past several years, we've seen significant growth in the city of East Lansing, primarily in the downtown area. While on the one hand, this sounds positive, the city has experienced some downsides as well. Because of the growth in student housing in the downtown area, our sewer stormwater system is not adequate to handle this increased demand. Not only do we have infrastructure lines that are 75 to 100 years old, but much of the downtown area does not have the capacity required. Thus, we've been trying to install additional lines alongside our current lines and putting liners inside these current lines to try to more cost-effectively extend their useful life to meet that expanded demand. When a new development comes in, they only pay for the structure required for their property. But once it reaches the easement, it is the city's responsibility to ensure that the capacity is large enough to handle the demand. Many of these developers have been provided incentives such as tax increment financing or TIF, in which the developer pays upfront for the infrastructure improvement on their property. Then they are the first to receive any tax benefit for a specified period of time in an effort to reimburse them for the upfront costs. The duration of these TIFs is frequently 20, 25 to 30 years, in which the developer is being compensated for upgrades just to his property, while still using the common lines, but not paying for that use. It's not until the end of the TIF that the taxpayers begin to receive money from that property to pay for all the upgrades the city had to make, not only to upgrade, but to maintain the system for the last 20, 25 to 30 years. Another tool that large organizations avail themselves of to reduce their overall costs is the Michigan Tax Tribunal. While the city has little input into the decision-making, we feel the full impact of those decisions. For example, the landings of MSU LLC in 2015 requested from the tribunal a reduction of taxable value from $11.3 million to $9 million, which was fortunately denied. In 2015, 2501 Abbott LLC sought a combined 2018-2019 taxable value reduction from $19.8 million to $17.8 million. The Doctors Company sought a 2019 taxable value reduction from $4.7 million to to 3.4 million. In 2015, Abbott Road Associates sought a taxable value reduction from 8.4 million to 7 million. And must we not forget that soon after Costco had their new building constructed in 2018, they sought a taxable value reduction from the tax tribunal. And due to public outrage because they had received so much preferential treatment already, they withdrew the request. As has been stated many times to core counsel, we're in very uncertain and trying times with little expectation of an imminent complete rebound. For those organizations with the financial resources to pursue accounting, finance, and legal expertise to take advantage of all options that will help to keep their organizations on better footing, they will. While those that can't afford it, especially small businesses, they will have to figure out how to do the best they can to survive. There is no magic pill. In the meantime, it is we, the taxpayers, who are stuck in the middle. Infrastructure improvements are not an option, they are a necessity. Our metered billing rates for water and sewer have doubled over the past 10 years. We now have an income tax with a duration of 12 years, and our Board of Water and Light bill now includes a franchise fee. What I am advocating for is that all users of our system pay their fair share, and exempting organizations from doing that only puts a higher burden on those who do, especially homeowners, small businesses, and those large corporations or organizations who did not take advantage of the tax-exempt options. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ann. Appreciate that. Emily, would you mind letting in the next caller?
Okay, those are all the callers on the line.
Okay, wonderful. Then we will move on to our next item, which is communication from council members. I will start with Councilmember Babcock.
Thank you. One thing that I haven't mentioned is the Commission on the Environment had an interesting presentation at its last meeting about paving, and I'm going to screw this up, but effectively, oh no, I didn't think I'd go first. The good news is we are using the more environmental system of paving for filling the patches on Bailey. And if you're interested, by all means, check in with me or Kathy DeChambeau or any member of the Commission on the Environment, and we can give you details. Sorry, my brain just froze.
Problem.
Over and out.
Councilmember Bacon.
No comment at this time.
Okay.
I could have
Councilmember
done
Watson.
that.
Yes.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem.
I just have a brief comment. I wanted to speak a little bit to the pause orders that were issued by the State Health Department over the weekend that will take effect tomorrow. The limiting of our restaurants and food service businesses downtown to outside service when obviously the weather is not particularly cooperative or takeaway is going to be a just devastating hit to some people who are barely scraping by. A lot of those businesses just brought back service staff with the anticipation of being able to serve people inside their establishments. Those people are probably at this point going to be laid off. It's going to be really hard to weather this, even though it's only 3 weeks. Just the kind of pendulum swing and having to let employees go, and then just trying to make overhead on extremely limited service options. So I just wanted to encourage anybody in our community that needs a hot meal to consider doing curbside pickup or takeaway from one of our local restaurants if you can. I'm not going to name names. I don't want to call out anybody individually, but it's just very difficult to cover a restaurant overhead doing only takeaway service. And it's really hard to make up for inside service options doing only curbside. So anything that we can do as a community to keep those businesses ticking through until that we can open up again would be much appreciated.
Thank you. I have a couple of comments into the same vein. So I think we should talk in general about this new pause to save lives the governor has put out there. Some of the items that I think we've really been looking for from the state in terms of guidance, especially when it comes to Thanksgiving coming up here. And as cliche as this sounds, somewhat of a way to take a pause to save Christmas, right? Or the New Year. As we're going in, this past weekend was, sorry, not this past weekend. Yes, this past weekend was Diwali, a celebration that my family has done for many, many years. And for the first time, we had it via Zoom. And so we did, prayer service. Well, I would have loved to see my family and my nanny, who is actually here in America from India. It wasn't safe, and it wasn't appropriate. And so we took that, as we could. And it's unfortunate, but the best way that I heard it really described, and this might have even been during the press conference, was yes, it is very difficult to think that you're not going to see some family members during the holiday this year, but it'd be much worse if you didn't see them at holidays coming up. And I think that this is here to protect people, and it's going to be difficult, but I think that it's important. And I think that we can do this as not only our city, but as our state to really slow the spread. In other countries and other areas where they have seen an increase in cases, short bursts like this, 3 week times or 2 weeks times of really strict rules being put in place have driven numbers down. That's just what we've seen in different areas. And so I think this is really important. But that being said, to talk to Mayor Pro Tem Greg's comments, and this is something that the city manager and I discussed, and me and Councilmember Bacon even discussed a little bit past weekend, just how this is going to affect our local businesses. It is going to have a very negative effect on some of our establishments that have been doing in-person dining. I think we have a responsibility to do everything in our power to respond. Luckily, last week, we had a really great presentation from one of our staff members, Adam Cummins, who laid out what was a 4-phase plan to include more outdoor dining options, facilitate more activity in our downtown in a safe way, especially for our businesses. And so I would just say, and I'm one council member here, but I think that we really need to move off that timeline as much as we can. A lot of phase 1 even that was laid out was talking about actually acquiring that infrastructure, that it could be used later on, whether that be in the winter now or in the spring later. I think that if we can do that, we should be doing it as soon as possible if those monies have already been allocated. Really, this is something that now we've even heard from business owners that this is something that they would like to see. And so I think that this is a good step in the right direction. I think we should be pushing that as much as we can, because we need to be supporting our local businesses now more than ever. And especially if it's just, those first couple of phases where some things can be moved around and we can be investing in, whether it's heat lamps or whether it's those, I know the chalets were something that is still being looked at, but those type of things I think would be very helpful, at least for the time being. Ron and I were speaking, and I even threw out an idea for, maybe a drive-through downtown day. And I thought about it a little bit more as we were going, and, maybe if we do have that infrastructure in place, we could have vendors outside with limited menus and have folks maybe drive through downtown Albert Street and, get food from a local business, right? And encourage the community to do that in a safe way. I mean, just more things that we can think of to try and help folks during this 3-week period. That's going to be really, really difficult for a lot of our businesses. I can commit as one individual council member that I'm willing to hear anything out. And I really want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can. So no ideas are bad ideas to me. I just really wanted us to do something where we can help. And again, just thanks to everybody that's doing the right thing and continuing to try and slow this spread. One of the big reasons why this is being put in place, and I might even pass this over to the city manager, whose significant other happens to be working in the hospital systems, but a few CEOs of different hospital systems throughout the state got together last week and described the situation on the ground. Really the lack of staffing they have now, folks that have had to quarantine themselves being part of the staff, the lack of available beds, the expectation that because of these holidays, they're going to see increased amount of cases, increased testing, and capacity that they might not be able to handle. So this is really a critical point. And obviously, I know that a lot of folks have COVID fatigue and have been talking about this issue through and through and understand it. But we're at a point here in Michigan, especially, where we need to make a decision on whether or not we're going to slow the spread or we're going to continue it. And our hospitals are at a capacity right now where they might not be able to handle it if we choose the wrong path. So, City Manager, did you have anything on it? You had a couple of really great comments that we were talking about this past weekend.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that, the big one that you've already touched upon from both of you is that city offices will be closed for the next 3 weeks during this pause. There'll be some very limited usage at the Hannah Community Center, primarily by appointment. All of this is to have fewer people in offices, fewer people congregating, fewer people coming into City Hall, having no people coming into City Hall, in order to protect our health system, our frontline health workers, and also to protect our city employees, because we have police officers, firefighters, all these employees, and we want to try to limit the amount of interaction they're having in City Hall with other employees overall. So I think that, I certainly agree and understand with the reasons for the closure. I think that I would caution that perhaps 3 weeks might extend longer than that. We're certainly going to try to plan for that so that we have as little service disruption as possible. But for our residents, it's important to know that even though City Hall building is closed, all of our services will continue wherever possible, virtually, by phone, by email, through web. And of course, all of our frontline operations of police, fire, EMS, and public works will continue basically as normal. So if you'll still be able to interact, you'll still be able to have the transactions you need with City Hall. They'll just be by phone or by web rather than in person. So wanting to protect, again, all of our frontline healthcare workers by having as few as people as possible getting sick, and also protect our employees. So that will start tomorrow. I know there's very little notice for our residents. We sent out a press release today. Our website also has a very detailed list in the front page where you can get to our continuity of operations plan, where it talks about all the different services from departments that you can go to and figure out how to do that, either by phone number or by web page. So I'd encourage our residents, if you have any questions for things big and small, is to look at that information, and please let us know if you need anything that can help. We'll be available. That's all. Mayor, I also wanted to mention to you regarding the item of the executive session.
Yes, and then my last comment will just be in relation to, I'm going to request a closed session to discuss a written confidential legal opinion with our city attorney pursuant to MCL 15.268, and I'll be doing that at the end of the meeting, I believe. So at that point, I'll most likely call for a roll call vote on that item. So thanks everybody that was tuning in, and everybody that's doing the right thing. And City Manager, I just again request this as soon as possible, when we can get that infrastructure in place to help our businesses. I think that it's necessary. Mayor Pro Tem.
If I can make one more comment before we move on, it's completely unrelated to everything that we've been talking about. I just wanted to call everyone's attention to the fact that the East Lansing Library is doing their Books, Bites, and Bids fundraiser online this year. Obviously, we can't do it in person, but that is a big fundraiser that supports programs at the library. So I'm reading from my email, so sorry about this. I think you do have to create an account in order to bid, but I'm pretty sure that the info will be on the library's website. Is probably the quickest way to do it, rather than have me read a complicated web address. But there are a lot of great things that you can bid on. You just can't do it in person this year. So I want to encourage everybody to check that out and see if there's anything that they can do to support our library.
Great, thank you. All right, seeing no other comment, our next item on the agenda is our discussion items. First one's 5.1, discussion of request for PA 328 personal property tax exemption from TechSmith, and I believe this is Tom Fehrenbach. Thank you for being there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So before you tonight is really an introduction to a request from TechSmith for a tax exemption for personal property. This would assist in their relocation and expansion into East Lansing. We have a number of folks here tonight as attendees, and they're here either to speak or to be available for questions, as there has been a team of folks working on this for quite some time now. With your blessing, Mayor, I'd like to pass it over to Bob Trezise, who's the President and CEO of the Lansing Economic Area Partnership. he can give you some introductions of who's on the call and kind of set the stage, and then we'll pass it to a couple other folks.
Yeah.
For just for an introduction, and then be ready for your questions.
Great, thank you. Bob?
All right, well, good evening, and thank you for the introduction, Tom. I just wanted to quickly mention that there are new winterization grants available from the MEDC. I'm sure Tom and Adam are aware of those, but could be $15,000 for the DDA, $10,000 for individual businesses to help winterize quickly their businesses and make a go of it this late fall and early winter. I definitely want to mention too, for months I've admired and want to thank you for your collective leadership with regard to this catastrophe, the virus. I think you've been spot on in your leadership and how to handle this, and a real example to others how to work with everybody and make the best of it. In that light, I think that's why this project is so important tonight. Clearly, we're going to sadly, tragically, lose a year to society, to the economy, maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years, I hope not. But another disaster that we all need to avoid is taking our eye off the ball, economic development in the long run, and suddenly accidentally creating a lost decade. That's what we really need to avoid. And so we have to keep our eye on amazing projects like this. And so I think it's a most apropos time to be talking about economic development, in fact, imperative. So Mayor Stevens, Mayor Pro Tem Gregg, City Council, and Manager Luhanis, I just want to thank you for the opportunity for our team to begin presenting to you this project tonight. I really appreciate the initial questions or comments from the speaker earlier on. These are the right comments and questions. I encourage that. I think I feel very confident that we have great answers to those kinds of questions that need to be asked. Always, economic development is quite a team effort. It's almost a cliche, but it's so true. And LEAP has been leading a team for the last 18 months on behalf of TechSmith to put this project together as this is a quite complicated project, and from where they're moving and what they want to do into the future. We're very fortunate to be working with a company like TechSmith. This is one of the premier software companies in the world, and it's founded and homegrown right now for the last 30 years. We all know them well. They're our neighbors and friends. This is the kind of company, its jobs, its high wages, its impact upon the community is sort of the dream company that we all dream of. It's a once in a generation opportunity, honestly, to land a company like this. What's going to happen here is I'm going to turn it over to Kevin Irwin, who is the CFO of TechSmith. He is going to talk about TechSmith and the project a little bit. And then our own LEAPS, Dylan Rush, is going to walk us through a detailed presentation, PowerPoint, about the facts of the project. And then we have a team on standby ready to answer any questions in their particular expertise field related to this project. We have Dean Bo Garcia from Lansing Community College related to the job training grants that will be available. We have Dave Washburn and Jeff Smith from the MSU Foundation. We have Pete Kramer from Kramer Development, Anthony Pecchio from Chrisman Construction. And so this is our team. We're ready to go and answer questions and be very transparent with you as we hopefully cross the finish line together here over the next couple months. It's been a long go. They've looked at many sites throughout the region. They're settling on this site in East Lansing. And of course, we think it's a terrific choice. So with that, I'd like to introduce Kevin Irwin, the CFO of TechSmith. Oh, I'm sorry. I want to say one more thing. Tom Fehrenbach and the staff, Tom Fehrenbach and the staff you have an awesome economic development staff. And I know Adam Cummings well for years too. And Tom has been very super on analyzing this project and pushing us and asking a lot of questions to get this right for the city. So thank you, Tom, for your leadership as well.
Yeah, we're pretty lucky on that one.
Yeah, you definitely are.
All right. Good evening. My name is Kevin Irwin. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for TechSmith. Wendy Hamilton, our CEO, our Chief Executive Officer, had a small scheduling glitch where she had to take on, as she said, her role of her other job as mom, and couldn't make it, even though she had planned on it. So she wanted to pass along her apologies for that. And she will be at the next couple meetings that we have scheduled for. So with that, I'm going to do a quick background on TechSmith. As Bob said, TechSmith's been around for about 30 years within the area. We've been at the site that we are right now at Jolly Road and Okemos Road for about 20 years. Before that, we were actually in Coolidge Road in East Lansing. So started at East Lansing and moved around a little bit and ended up where we are. Our key products are Snagit and Camtasia. They're full-fledged software products. They're sold throughout the world. We go through and you look, we've sell into 189 countries worldwide. We sell e-commerce, we sell through distribution and wholesale. We go through, our customers range from the Fortune 500 to small businesses to the top 2,000 educational institutions worldwide. So our business itself, like I said, we develop software. We have software engineers, we have tech support. If you call our help desk within our footprint over on Woodlake right now, you would actually be calling into them. If you call our sales team, you'll be calling into someone at Woodlake. So we have inside sales, we have marketing, you have someone like me in finance and accounting. So we have a full gamut of professionals that work for TechSmith. We have about 275 people right now. We're looking to continue to add. Since the beginning of this year, I looked it up, we've added 11 heads. And so those are full-time positions that we've brought on. It's been a mix of people that have we've hired within the community, and a couple people have moved and relocated on our behalf into the community. And right now, some of them are waiting to relocate as we go through and kind of settle down within the environment that we're operating in. The team right now is working 100% remote. The whole company, except for the facilities manager, is working remote right now. Despite working remote, we continue to go through and provide service and sales to our customers. Besides full-time employees, we also go through and hire interns. So our intern program ranges from 30, 35 full-time interns over the summer. We pull those folks from multiple universities throughout the country. We also have intern programs that go throughout the year, and we pull those folks primarily from MSU and LCC. So we do hire the students within the community to go through and provide help and services from that standpoint. From a cash compensation standpoint, our average cash compensation to employees is $100,000. We do go through hire technical employees in at about $80,000. We do have a range of salaries and roles that the technical employees are the peak in terms of salaries. Why we're looking at the location we're looking at and the partners we're looking at. As I mentioned, we are well connected with MSU. If you take a look at our staff, a large portion of our staff graduated from MSU. So they're a good feeder of skills into the company, not only from an engineering standpoint, but from an inside sales standpoint, marketing standpoint, accounting standpoint. So across the board, we have a lot of MSU hires. In addition to that, we also have many hires from LCC, so Lansing Community College. They primarily go through and fill out the roles that we have in IT and stuff. So we are pulling from the local schools for a lot of our hires, allowing the community to maintain the people that they're going through and training from that perspective. Our location with MSU, our goal is to continue to expand that relationship with MSU. And so working with the foundation, with the location where we are looking to be at, we feel it will give us a better opportunity to hire more interns. It puts us in closer proximity to MSU to take and be more engaged with the university itself. Obviously, that puts us in a location to be closer to the amenities, both downtown and around the campus of East Lansing. So from that standpoint, we look at that as a big positive for helping our employees and then also going through and helping the community. The other thing that we've been talking to the foundation about is how to go through and attract other technology companies with the visions that are the vision that the MSU Foundation has shared with us and some of the goals that they've put in. We look at ourselves as kind of getting started as a technology company foundation to hopefully go through and provide an attractive neighbor to other companies. So that would be our ideal state, that we TechSmith are being part of something that'll end up growing and being bigger than just us. So the building itself, we're looking at, it's about 60,000 square feet. We have gone through a couple different design cycles. As I said, we're all working remote right now. We've done a survey of the staff and really looked at the design of the building. And the staff itself wants to get back into the building part-time at a minimum. So a majority of our staff we expect will be back when we are able to work not remotely anymore. We don't believe that 100% of the staff will be 100% in the building. However, we expect a majority will be working at a minimum part-time within the building. And we've designed the building along those lines to go through and support that. The cost of the building we're looking at right now is about $18 million. And then the personal property on top of that from an investment standpoint. We're looking to add 25 or so jobs over the next several years. We got 5 openings right now as kind of a running start to kind of give you an idea of what we've been doing at least over the last, since the beginning of 2020 and what we have going on from that standpoint. The other thing that I want to go through and highlight is from a TechSmith standpoint, what we're doing within the community itself. One of the things that is important to Bill Hamilton, who's our owner, and to Wendy, our CEO, is really being part of the community and contributing to the community itself. Wendy herself is the CEO or the chairperson for the Lansing Chamber of Commerce. Wendy also sits on the board of Impression 5. Impression 5 is one of the key nonprofits that TechSmith is engaged with. MSU, we're also engaged with MSU on things like Design Day for their engineering school as a sponsor. The other thing that we've set up is an endowment with Lansing Community College. So that's a recent development there. In addition to that, you were talking about restaurants earlier. Obviously, when we're in the building, we go through, our employees and TechSmith go through and spend a lot of the money, et cetera, with lunch, buying food, et cetera, for our employees. One of the things that we've done, especially with the pandemic, is we found the favorite restaurants of our employees and purchased both gift cards and then meals for frontline responders. So we've gone through and done that, and we continue to look at opportunities along those lines to go through and provide support within the community. For some of the other areas, we do go through and open our building up for, like there's a testing and a Q&A group that meets. We go through and we have a couple TechSmithies that are part of that. We open our building for support there. We've done things like blood drives, et cetera. So we are looking to engage and be part of the community and be a good neighbor within the community. So that goes through and covers what I need to cover. So I think, Dylan, I don't know how much I took of your slides, but you may continue on.
All good, all good. Thank you, Kevin. Good evening, Council. Emily, are you going to bring up the PowerPoint? Or Nicole, sorry about that. Okay, and I will just I'll tell you next slide as we go forward. I won't reiterate too much of what Kevin talked about, but do want to hit on some additional points here. Again, by way of timeline, this started probably about summer of 2019, where TechSmith engaged Leap and Kramer Management, as Bob mentioned, on a region-wide site search. It was rather complex and took some time, but as we talked about, TechSmith did an extensive analysis and does have a preferred site in Crescent Road over that MSU-owned property there. With that said, as you can imagine, with the investment that Kevin mentioned, the board of directors, the company for their company has a fiduciary responsibility in this final site selection process. That does take into account a lot of different factors, including other viable site choices, their current location, and of course, the cost, which is what this presentation is going to heavily be focused on. Go to the next slide, Nicole. You heard this from Kevin, and actually you see the 6 new full-time hires. That's how fast this company is growing. We're actually behind here a little bit on this slide in terms of full-time employees. But I do want to mention this last bullet point here of how well this company and this industry and the employees within it really match well with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation's 5-year strategic plan. If you have some free time, I encourage you to dig into that. It's an awesome document. You'll see about 5 or 6 top industries that the state is targeting. And as you can imagine, tech is right up there at the top with what they call targeted, pathway, promising type jobs. And these are high wage jobs above industry standards that lead to high quality of life and upward mobility, something that this project definitely has. You can head on to the next one. Why East Lansing? I will just reiterate again to keep things moving so we can go to the discussion portion of this. I want to make known the holistic relationship between TechSmith, MSU, and especially MSU Foundation. Kevin talked about the talent pipeline, the magnet that MSU is. Combine that with the foundation's actual support on site development and the commitment to infrastructure support, which oftentimes is a barrier for projects like this. You really get a quality relationship that benefits all parties. And I think, as Kevin said, that's what TechSmith wants to see going in the future, especially that last bullet point there as a spark plug. When you have the synergies of the community, of the private sector, an international corporation, then of course the education side, you really can get this engine churning to be a hub for future high-tech companies. That's what TechSmith is looking for, as well as the partners on this call. Move on forward. More details here Kevin touched. We're naturally conservative in these numbers, and they are detailed in your memo in the packet. The square footage and the investment numbers over 3 years, and the similar timeline for the jobs, 3 to 5 years, and just mentioning again the quality of wages here. So these are the parameters that are going to use here in the next few slides as we look into the cost, risk, reality, and the benefit from the value of this project. All right, we're getting to a rhythm now, Nicole. Great job. Naturally, big numbers, big build. There's going to be a risk assessment. What we've presented here for you on the screen is essentially an as is versus a what would be, for lack of a better phrase. On the left, the 2019 total property taxes in Allen Township. That's their current headquarters. You see the $170,000 in 2019. Apples to apples, if this happened in 2019 at East Lansing, you can see the difference in total annual property taxes with new headquarters. It's more than twofold, just on a purely property tax basis. Now, it's a little more complicated because TechSmith is a lessee, so it may be simpler to think about in terms of TechSmith rent would be more than doubling, though that's too simple as well. Nevertheless, that's a property tax impact from one location to another that the company would be taking on in East Lansing. To round out the taxes from an annual as is to what would be, again on the left, income tax. The current employees at TechSmith who live in East Lansing, 22 at 1% income tax, you're looking at $23,000 that was paid to East Lansing in 2019. Conversely, on the right, you have a formula that's based on the conversation that Kevin touched upon in terms of the projections of who would be in office and applying those income taxes to the East Lansing income tax, more than threefold the income tax revenue to East Lansing. And we can get into those assumptions later on afterwards. It gets a little funky. Just know that there would be substantial income tax increase year over year from Allen Township to East Lansing as well. Switching gears, so that's kind of the TechSmith side, the cost risk reality. Now switching over to the East Lansing side, the value that TechSmith brings to East Lansing financially, the tax value. What you have here is simply a baseline. There's no property tax revenue, obviously, and we just discussed the $23,000 a year for income tax revenue. That's the annual value that TechSmith provides to East Lansing at the moment. Now we're going to compare it to if we apply the project parameters to East Lansing here on this next slide and see the difference. Very important to pay attention to the title here. On this slide, over 10 years, this is a long-term investment project. It's safe to assume that we should look upon this project on a long-term scale. In the three buckets that you have on the screen here, in real property tax revenue, that would be the building, the 60,000 square foot building approximately. And then you have personal property tax revenue. That's the office furniture, computers, servers, etc. And then of course income tax revenue for the rest of the I think till 2030 or through 2030 with that 91,000 amortized over the life of the millage. So a substantial increase from that baseline at 23,000 per year to what you see over here in 10 years. And again, we can jump into the assumptions afterward if you would like to. Next slide. Knowing this and kind of taking everything into account from the beginning of this presentation with Bob and Kevin's remarks and what TechSmith is hoping to get out of this, and then comparing that to the cost risk reality, TechSmith is here tonight to try to justify the cost of the move a little bit more and working in partnership with East Lansing, namely through the Public Act 328 exemption. That is a personal property tax exemption, as you know, on all new to the state personal property investment. So the computers that are already owned will not be exempt. All new investment made in East Lansing would be under this 328. Now, I think Tom's going to talk about a little bit more about that word waiver in there, so I won't belabor the point. Essentially, this is a company that makes personal property investments very frequently, rather than a manufacturer would make machinery and equipment investments early on right away that depreciate over a long time. So that's what that waiver is in there. I'll let Tom explain that a little bit more. In general, a 328 is a really cool tool. It helps the core communities, the East Lansings, Detroits, etc., kind of gain a competitive edge to level the playing field a little bit more strictly on a tax basis. And we see it across the state pretty often to attract companies. It's not too far-fetched to see a 328 for high-tech attraction projects. Move on to the big slide here. Now this is assuming the baseline on the left. You see that $207,000. That's the income tax over the life of the income tax as is right now. In the middle, you see what the project's value would be over 10 years to East Lansing, assuming that the PA 328 personal property exemption and the waiver does go through. You get a $1.5 million tax revenue over 10 years with this project. And of course, the differential there is just under 1.3 million. And if I'm doing my mental math real quick, that's a little more than sixfold from the no project to the project, even including the incentive on a 10-year scale. Go to the next slide, rounding third base here. We're talking a lot about taxes right now. We want to make sure we included this slide to demonstrate the comprehensive nature of this project, the tax revenue side, and also the workforce support, the workforce development side. We keep talking about people. That's obviously very important. In conversations with our friends at the MEDC, with their performance-based grants on job training, and also with our friends at LCC, as they administer the Michigan New Jobs Training Program. They've been going underway for quite some time now. I wouldn't pay too much mind to the numbers on the right. These are fully estimates pending approval. They're still in review and do take into consideration local support that is put forth. But nevertheless, we wanted to show the multiple angles that are at play here on the tax side and at the workforce support side. Last but not least, just for clarity, we wanted to lay out what would happen going forward here with this, the exemption process following the act on November 24th next week. Public hearings would be set. That would be 2 public hearings. One, and again, this is in Tom's memo, I do believe, for the actual exemption district, industrial development district, that would house the actual certificate that applies to TechSmith. So a public hearing for the district and then a public hearing for the exemption for TechSmith. Those public hearings, after observing the 15-day notice, would take place on December 15th, with the district creation public hearing and vote occurring first by law, and if approved, would then head on over in the same meeting, which is pretty regular, for the public hearing and vote for the actual certificate for the company. From there on out, it's staff and us, and working with TechSmith and the State Tax Commission for ultimately the final presentation there and approval up at the top. That's what the process looks like, and I believe, Nicole, that is the end of our presentation. Oh, as Bob mentioned, we have many others on that we can direct questions to, but enjoyed the presentation. I think I'm sending it back to you, Tom.
Thank you. And thank you all for your good presentations. I just wanted to note that there is additional context available in the staff memo. We've also completed our review of the financial realities. I think we used a bit more conservative estimates, but came up with some figures that are still financially pretty impressive for a deal of this nature. And we've also confirm that this is really a consistent project that with not only the goals outlined in the master plan, the economic development strategy, but also the council's policy on tax exemptions of this nature as they've been applied. So with council's blessing, we'd like to move forward with scheduling the public hearings. As Dylan mentioned, we would place them on the agenda on the 24th. To be set for December 15th. They need to happen in a certain sequential order. And further, there is an agreement that would need to be entered between the city and TechSmith, which would outline some of the mechanics of the ultimate effectuation of the tax exemption. So we are all here to have this discussion with you and would welcome any questions that the council has.
Sure. So, anybody from the council have any questions on this? Yeah, go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem, and then.
Yeah, I just had a technical question. So if we go through this whole thing, when we create the exemption district, which is very specific to this project, and then I'm not trying to invite any sort of ill will, but if that project for some reason did not go through, what would happen with that exemption district that was created?
So the exemption district would still exist. And then the exemption itself, the second action that you would take is specific to the company. So that would effectually go away. You could at that point decide to keep the district in place or not.
Okay.
And there's a method for basically canceling the district as long as there isn't an active.
Obviously, I hope that TechSmith is fully goes through and everything is smooth and that they find a new home there up on Crescent Road. But I just wanted to make sure that we weren't tying ourselves into kind of an automatic exemption for a future project if for some unforeseen reason this fell apart. But okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Councilmember Babcock.
Thank you. For all the decades I've spent in this community, sometimes I'm still astonished by what we have right under our noses. And this is one of those moments. This is really an amazing company that I'd only started hearing about a few months ago and still didn't have a full appreciation of it until you began presenting tonight. I do have one question, which is the slides showed East Lansing without TechSmith, well, without TechSmith getting the personal property tax abatement. However, what would the personal property tax revenue be to the city without the abatement?
Tom, would you like me to answer from our perspective first?
Sure.
Pulling up the slides real quick. On a 10-year scale, if there was no personal property tax exemption, you would be looking at around $150,000 in specifically personal property taxes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Other council members? Yep. Councilmember Bacon.
Yeah, I think more broadly, not so much TechSmith question, per the question of the caller, as far as impact, both on infrastructure and even environmental and around those types of things with the rapid expansion kind of everywhere. I'd like to have maybe a little bit more broad understanding of that impact of a large development, and then hopefully that traction that TechSmith will have to other tech companies or otherwise industry, light industry or technology to that area, kind of the long-term impact of what that's going to look like to the broader infrastructure. I think that was a really good question from the community member on that impact as far as aging infrastructure and that type of thing. And then how we move forward from there as we do all these rapid expansions in many areas of the downtown and broader community. So I not so much specifically at this project, but just in a more broad understanding of that impact would be of interest.
So that's a big question, and I'll do
not
my
asking
best
for
to try to
action per this, but I thought it's a really valid question. Broadly.
And I must apologize. I was having a little technical issues on the beginning of the meeting, and I didn't catch the caller's full comments. But
just kind of
from
the
my
impact
perspective,
on aging infrastructure and expansion and that type of thing, and as far as revenue to support aging infrastructure and that kind of thing, in lieu of tax abatement, not specifically at this deal, but considering this may be models for other expansions and that type of thing around aging infrastructure and that type of thing, and adding new stressors to the grid even, or to whatever we're doing, that we're as deep as we are wide, I guess it was a good question from the community. So
absolutely. City manager.
Yeah, so I just want to jump in. I think that I did get to hear the question. It's a good question. I kind of see it the other way around, and I think that our public works would as well, that these projects allow us to invest in infrastructure that we would not otherwise be able to invest in. So when we had the big project, the Center City project downtown, that allowed us to tear up the streets and do lots of infrastructure for pipes that were, 9-inch sewer pipes and 12-inch sewer pipes that were put in 80 years ago that were wholly inadequate. And then we got a chance with the project coming in to renew the infrastructure that services that whole area. A lot of times also, you could be building infrastructure that's at the tail end. So this infrastructure actually helps neighborhoods upstream of them have better drainage for sewer systems. So I think it's actually the other way around, that these projects allow us to upgrade infrastructure that we might not otherwise be able to do. But that's something we could have Mr. House speak about in more detail at a later meeting, because it is kind of a big question of how we're investing in infrastructure. I think on this project, it actually is going to be, if I'm correct, Tom, who's handling the infrastructure? Is this all on campus?
Yeah, that's part of what I was going to say. This is going to be supported by the MSU Foundation in terms of the infrastructure investment. So there's no sort of brownfield TIF or anything like that. So our incentive support would be limited in terms of the city to the PA 328 tax exemption.
Answer. Thank you.
I had a further clarification question. Just because this is located on campus, and I'm trying to find this in the memo, I thought it was outlined somewhere in here. I didn't realize, I guess, that because this is a private building on public land, that the building would be subject to property tax. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, the expectation is that the land will be tax exempt. But the building on the land will be taxable from a real property tax perspective. And that will be something that will need to be codified in the agreement that we have, just so that there's a crystal clear understanding of how things will work, and an expectation that will be the case. But that's certainly what everyone has as anticipated.
I think that's a significant detail to me because, you know, we have a huge area of our town that's technically within our boundary that's not subject to property tax. And that has been kind of an ongoing stressor on our side of the street. And so, you know, if there is going to be a for-profit business development on MSU's campus, which I actually think is a fantastic idea, I think that's one of the things that I really like about this project is the idea of not so much the financial benefit, but the intangible benefits that come along with that, having, you know, full-time employees working, everything that full-time employees do on their lunch hours and after work, and you know, and then also just that idea of talent retention and cooperating with our local universities to kind of cement some of that talent here locally and give them a well-compensated career is, you know, is great. But the idea also that we would have at least this one tiny little part of MSU campus that we would get a little smidgen of property tax from when the whole area over there is tax-free is also very appealing.
So I might offer a comment. I think actually Ron and Jesse might have just looked at my notes before, because I think they hit on everything that I was going to hit on there. I do think that Ron's point is very well taken. You know, the other factor of this is kind of those indirect costs that might not be in the PowerPoint, might not be in the presentation during the vote, but might be real for us later down the line. So I do think that Ron's question was valid, as you know, so as well as the callers. You know, if we're talking about infrastructure improvements that might, you know, come down the pipeline due to increased traffic and activity in the area, or if it's just, you know, conversation with, you know, our public safety officials on what this means for them. Although I imagine the infrastructure is a bigger conversation. I think that's important as part of the conversation. I would definitely love to hear from Mr. House on that a little bit more. You know, and my next question really was going to be actually on the distinction between the building and the land. And if actually, since we have our city attorney here, just because I'm not an attorney, would you mind kind of running through, I guess, like, is that something that's just in general? Is it something, Tom, thank you very much for making your comment and saying that's something that needs to be outlined crystal clear, because I would agree with that as well. But is that something that's standard? Is that something we're going to have to come to an agreement on? Is that, just give me a run through on what the difference there is.
So when we're talking about, there are a couple of tax statutes that certainly apply. The first of which you've talked about briefly, which is the land being tax exempt, but the building built on tax exempt land. So could be taxable, as well as there's what's called Section 181 tax statute. That's the lessee user tax, which also could be applied if the building still is publicly owned but privately used. Then the user could be subject to property taxes to the same extent as any other property owner would be for that use of public infrastructure, tax exempt property.
Okay.
But in both of those, I agree, would likely be spelled out in the agreement. Okay.
All right. Good to know. I definitely think that is arguably one of the most important points of this. So glad to hear it. And as Jesse mentioned, you know, we're in the first conversation on the council table about this, but I think overall impact is important to talk about. You know, not just maybe the taxes that are coming towards us and our bottom line, but also the impact that this could have on, and especially you know, that sector of East Lansing, some of our businesses down on Trowbridge, especially, you know, that might see a little bit of an uptick from a lot of people working in the area year round. I think that obviously having more businesses within East Lansing that are both good actors throughout the community, that are also working year round, and really driving that talent pipeline is really important. I happen to be the chair of Capital Area Michigan Works as well, and something we're just constantly talking about is how do we retain talent in our area. And I think that while TechSmith is in the region right now, I think having a more direct relationship with the university, having that pipeline really well established is something that's going to be beneficial, not just to East Lansing, but to the region as a whole. So, and as Bob Showers from Clinton County would say, something that benefits East Lansing benefits the entire area. And I think that's an apt assessment. So those are my initial thoughts on this. I'm hoping to hear a little bit more from the community on this as well. I think the numbers make sense to me as they're presented right now. I think that some of the concerns that were outlined are valid, and I'd love to hear some further follow through on those questions. But really appreciate everybody being here. I think this is a great project, and I'm looking forward to having more discussion on it. Councilmember Watson, did you have something?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mayor. I had some questions.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So my questions are more TechSmith business questions. And so when you guys mentioned the cash compensation, is that a term for salary and benefits or just salary?
That's salary and bonuses, commissions, anything that's cash that shows up in a paycheck.
Okay. And I know you mentioned the average salary. Does anyone get paid minimum wage? And so that would be maybe janitors that you employ or really anybody.
So no, folks such as the cleaning crew, we do not, we lease our buildings now. We are not paying those folks. Those folks are paid separately. So I don't know what the compensation is there.
Okay. But so then no minimum wage staff?
No, not that are directly employed by TechSmith. So in addition, all our employees have access to a 401k, paid time off. They also go through and get healthcare benefits provided.
Okay. And how did you guys come to the decision about the part-time work from home and part-time work in the office, like going forward? Like, I was just curious, what was some of the feedback, or what have you guys learned during this epidemic with the work from home folks?
So from that standpoint, as either Dylan mentioned or Tom mentioned, we started this back in the summer, middle of 2019, and we had put together a building design and so on based on the work that we did. When the pandemic hit, we had already started doing some test runs of working remotely. So we quickly pivoted to working remotely 100%. So no one was negatively impacted as we moved to the remote work. We have a couple facilities folks. We still need people there making sure raccoons don't move in, et cetera. So they are still reporting to work from that standpoint. Mm-hmm. We did a follow-up survey and found what people liked and what people didn't like about working remotely. And as you would expect, there were people that are like, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. And there's a group that are like, I need to get out of the house. Mm-hmm. Where most of the folks fall into is part-time remote. They like the flexibility. They like the ability to work with their team, but they also like the ability to be able to put their heads down and work and not be distracted by what is around them at work. Yeah. So what we're finding in terms of our workforce is they're missing out on a camaraderie and the ability to gather. And so as we shift into this building, we will have space for individual work time and so on. But what my view is as the CFO on how we allocate out our money, we went with a smaller building than our original plan, but I expect that when people come into the building, we will be doing more team building. We've set the spaces up to go through and drive more team building. And so what will happen is the employees will show up, they'll be spending their time working as a team and doing what you want from the happen chance encounters, those types of things. And then they'll also then be working remotely. We'll have the tools in place to allow Zoom calls, et cetera. And that's where they'll be working with their heads down on their projects and doing more of their individual contribution work. So long-winded answer, but really what we did is we talked to the employees. I want to say it was probably the June timeframe. So we had time to get over the initial like, oh, I don't have to commute and all of that type of stuff. Got into some of the feeling of what's it like to have to go through work and balance out the education of your children, taking care of and working next to your spouse, any of the different the different constraints that do show up as you're working from home.
Yeah. Thank you. My last question is just, do you guys offer paid or unpaid internships?
Other paid internships.
Okay.
Dana, I appreciate that question. Thank you.
Okay.
Actually, go ahead, Councilmember Bacon.
Yeah, it's really difficult to kind of hide the enthusiasm around the project, but I am committed to us asking the hard questions. I think as all of us being kind of newer to council and seeing some of the projects and the way certain things have gone and appeared like a lot of hard questions weren't asked up front. I think that it's just important that we keep that kind of edge to the conversation, but just with that in mind, that I absolutely am so excited about this project. I think it's an amazing opportunity for the community, but I don't want that to be get in the way of us asking hard questions and making sure we're getting the things answered for the community and abroad. So I think that's important too, despite my enthusiasm for this project. So just want to put that out there before we get into a little bit harder portions of this. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Bacon. I think that was a very well put comment.
I'm actually waiting for his question. I'm ready.
Just a statement. No, they'll come up for sure. This is the honeymoon phase. So.
I have a follow-up on something Councilmember Watson said. So given the fact that this pandemic has changed a lot of what the scene is in terms of workplace, and the idea that you guys are really doing kind of a part-time in the office, part-time out of the office, the amount of investment that you have here laid out for an in-person office building, does that amount of investment change if we don't see the results that we want to see through hopefully a vaccine eventually? But of course that the way that people work is just so different now, and this is a really significant investment in terms of an in-person space. So you said you've already somewhat downsized once on this project. Do you imagine that's a possibility in the future, or do you think that you've made the right calculations and this is regardless of whether folks are working part-time at home, part-time in the office for the next couple of years even to come, this is the right move for you as a company?
So from our perspective, eventually people will be working back in an office. It's going to be different work, and we're setting it up to do different work. So we believe that we've captured what the employees are looking for. We're working remote 100% now. We right now don't know when the employees will be back in the office. Obviously, we talked earlier about the current MIOSHA recommendations, suggestions. I don't know what to call them at the moment, but where if people can work remotely, you can't require them to come into the office. So TechSmith has been very flexible about that. We currently have anybody who wants to come in has to be scheduled. We don't have anybody except for a minimal staff to keep the buildings up and running, working in our buildings. And right now, we are not having people come in because everybody is able to work remotely. So over the long run, like I said, we conferred with our employees, and the employees were looking for a place to work remotely on a regular basis, just not full-time on a regular basis. So if you take a look at the information that Dylan presented out, you'll see that we didn't use the full workforce calculation for the tax benefits that are coming in from an income tax standpoint. We didn't use the full value of the salaries there. We took and looked at it from a workforce having partial remote and then some people being full remote. So we didn't go in and promise, and this was, again, from our discussion with Wendy, Bill, from the board all the way down, is being conservative and being realistic with what our expectations are.
Okay, thank you. Any other council members have any follow-up questions on this? All righty. Well, thank you. I, as just one council member, will say I am in favor of scheduling these out and us having maybe some more of those difficult conversations going forward. Thank you guys for being here. Other council members have any takes on that issue? I'm only one of the council, so.
Yeah, I think we should go ahead and schedule those public hearings, and then I'll spend the next 15 days thinking of hard questions.
All right. All right. I'm seeing nods and smiles and thumbs up, so I'm assuming that we have some consensus on that. Thank you guys for being here. Thanks, Kevin, Bob, Dylan, and everybody else that was on the call. Appreciate your time. Thank you, Tom. Well. All righty. Our next item on our agenda is an update and discussion regarding downtown parking. This is, again, is Mr. Fehrenbach.
Thank you, Mayor. And Nicole, if you wouldn't mind pulling up my presentation as well. Staff is returning tonight with an update on our downtown parking enterprise. You can go ahead and start the slides. So we continue, obviously, to experience challenges due to the pandemic and related circumstances, and yet continue to bear our ongoing structural costs. Like many businesses in our city, we're doing our best to weather the pandemic. Go ahead, next slide. In August, the council gave us direction to move to a 15-minute grace period, encourage pickup and drop-offs, defer previously planned price increases, and defer costs as much as possible. Go ahead. As is reflected in the attached occupancy counts and financial statement, our revenue is quite a bit off pace from where we were at this point in the fiscal year, last fiscal year. Overall income is about 1.2 million, which is off pace from our expectations, about 36%. Go ahead, next slide. We do think the 15-minute grace period has had a positive effect. As you can see, we had about 30,000 such transactions, some of which certainly supported pickups from restaurants and retailers. Go ahead to the next slide. In terms of our expenses, we were able to tighten the belts further, mostly due to personnel savings, as well as that deferral of maintenance projects and some purchases. Go ahead to the next slide. Overall, year-to-date, fiscal year-to-date, we do show a net positive. However, it's not necessarily great news as we're significantly off pace, and we still have some large debt payments to make in this fiscal year. We do expect to remain solvent for the foreseeable future due to working capital that's available as sort of a fund balance. However, we'll need to continue to closely monitor the situation. We are concerned about the downsides of continued deferred maintenance as well. And as we continue to defer as much maintenance as possible, we are preparing a plan for your consideration and ultimately, prior to that, the parking task force regarding what simply cannot and what should not, from staff's perspective, be pushed off much longer. We do expect to be discussing that with the parking task force in the near future, and then, as I mentioned, returning to council for consideration. Obviously, there's still uncertainty ahead. Parking is linked to the overall downtown health, and we continue to also partner with economic development initiatives to safely support customers doing business here. That's in all of our interests. Go ahead and to the next slide. The parking task force did meet last week, and although there was not a quorum present, some of the ideas from staff for revenue generation or revenue enhancements were generally supported by the task force. And those would be creating a moped permit program, and also looking at looking at some large discounts for some of the upper floors, specifically in Division to start, as a place where we're severely underutilized. Also exploring creative ways to create more income, such as storage uses, maybe some other ideas like that. And then again, sort of partnering on the economic development activities, such as the winter markets that Mr. Cummins gave a presentation about yesterday, the open air utilization, and then any other kind of activities to increase traffic were generally supported. There were some other ideas that were less well received, I would say, by the task force, such as selling permits for lot 11, surface lot, and not transferring the $5,000 that the parking fund typically does to the DMB. Those did not go over that well. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions that you have. We have Mr. Sharrow, the parking administrator, is also available, and we're happy to have a conversation with you.
Great. Thanks for being here. And I just mentioned before we get into questions, I think there might be something wrong on the online agenda, because I tried to click on the presentation tab on our thing. It didn't pop up, so that just might be something to sort out. All right, council members, just go ahead, chime in. Yeah, go ahead.
I had a question about, so I think my only concern about I like the idea of moving our permits into underutilized garages. I think that's a really great idea. Are we sold out on permits, or do we have permits available?
We have permits available, a substantial amount in every facility.
Okay, so I guess I think it's a good idea, but maybe well, I don't know. I'm worried that people who are paying full price for permits are just going to choose the cheaper permit, and then we're still going to we're not going to really net gain there. That's kind of more of a solution for when we are at a recovered occupancy rate. The other question that I had in Tom's presentation, everything seemed to be down about 30%, except for the validations were down considerably more than that. Do you think that's just because downtown businesses are struggling and they're not willing to bear the cost of parking validation?
Absolutely. I think it's something that they've just had to, out of necessity, cut to make ends meet and to try to survive this situation.
Yeah, I certainly sympathize with that. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we can't address that. I'm not going to ask business owners that are struggling to make their rent to pretty please validate parking. Seems a little salt in the woundish. Okay, yeah, I mean, I was on that parking task force call, and I think, Caleb, you are perfectly placed to know that there's really no great solution, because we've got a lot of great minds thinking about this, and no perfect solution has risen to the top. One thing about the moped parking is, I think what was proposed in the task force meeting was just a general downtown moped parking permit. And I was thinking we could kind of meet that halfway and just do an in the ramp moped parking permit, since they are, there is some benefit to being parked inside. There's weather protection, and that might be worth it to people. I know there's a considerable number of mopeds that are already using the ramps, and we even actually have some areas set aside for them to park in the ramps. And I think people who appreciate having, close access to their vehicles, weather protection to their vehicles, that might be worth something. And it might be kind of a step forward to doing a broader downtown permit. I'm really concerned that selling moped permits will encourage mopeds to park indefinitely at bike racks. I already kind of see the bike rack across the street from my shop being used as a moped storage facility, and it makes it a little less appealing for day use bikers. Obviously, that's not going to be like a big winter problem, but come spring, I want to make sure that people who are trying to use our downtown by bicycle have a place that's convenient to park their vehicles. Okay, that's it for me for now.
I have a couple of questions. So we're talking about permits, and I definitely, I mean, I've been probably talking about, you know, permits and the amount of people that are living downtown and hopefully going to be working downtown for a bit here. So I was wondering, do we have any idea on really how many people are, or baseline numbers on how many people are now living in downtown, like what that percentage of folks actually have permits within our lots, just based on the amount of beds that we have, and then you know, the amount of permits that we're actually issuing?
No, we don't necessarily have data on where exactly have studied the data where exactly people live. It depends on what address they provide. Sometimes people provide their home address, as in home where they came from, if they're here for college. So there is not any studied data on exactly where people live.
I mean, is there a way that we maybe could work with some of our bigger landlords in the downtown area to try and figure out, like, you know, how many of their tenants are? I'm just trying to think of maybe there are ways that we can market or strategically advertise, right, our permits to those folks that are living in our downtown more aggressively. And if there are going to be more kind of incentives, you know, I think about, you know, the possibility of moderate income housing coming into downtown. And this is a conversation back then too. You know, what are our permits mean for those folks that want to live and work in the downtown? And of course, then the CFCU and this kind of constant conversation around parking. It just, I want to know if there's more we can be doing to try and advertise towards those folks. And the answer might be no, and that's okay. But maybe a little bit more information on that would be helpful.
Sure. I think that, oh, go ahead.
No, just a clarification question on permits. I think we have people who use permits for long-term storage of vehicles who live close to the ramps, but then the part that we're missing is the people who are using their permits as day users who are coming in for classes on campus.
Right.
So obviously those people are not, there's no interest in having a permit because they don't have to go to campus. So do you think that that's where kind of the generally large number of available permits is coming from?
Yes, students not being downtown and also business users who are working from home remotely now.
Right.
Charles Garage, for example, had heavy business utilization and it is now very underutilized. There's a lot of daytime parking permit utilization in that facility.
Got it. So there's not, I mean, we can definitely market those to the apartment users, but they've kind of already found a car storage solution where they would have come looking for a permit, right? And then those temporary day use population, until we have a recovery of day users downtown, there's not going to be a demand there. So, you know, identifying that population that might have the use of a permit who currently isn't using one, it seems like there's not really a easily identifiable demographic to market that to.
Yeah, so just to address a couple of those thoughts, that's kind of what we had envisioned as what we would pilot for the upper floors of Division, because we are aware of some demand on towards the eastern side of town, and I think that we would try to market that to those folks. I think it's also worth having, you know, putting some thought into how the housing study could help us think through, you know, who's using parking or where the demands might be, so that we could, you know, potentially create some additional programs. We also have thought, you know, in a traditional time frame of sort of a daytime permit. Obviously, that's probably not, you know, something that's very appropriate for today's situation, but something, you know, we can explore in the future. You know, there's never a one size fits all, and there's always, you know, things that you have to balance on the other side of the ledger. But that's the kind of, you know, calculus of parking, I guess.
Yeah. No, and again, I'm not trying to say like that, you know, that'd be an overall solution. It's just kind of thoughts as we're going forward. You know, even the hub, right, is a conversation where, you know, they have a limited amount of parking obviously available to their tenants. And, you know, if you go down Grand River, right, and you look at the back of the Hagen's property and every other property, it just, you know, it says no hub parking, right, and it's still there. And Every once in a while you can see a tow truck coming out. So I mean, I know that people find creative ways to find parking in East Lansing. I certainly did when I was a student. But I do think there's some opportunity. I just don't know where it is. So I don't have an answer for you, but I think that maybe we have something there. Mayor Pro Tem.
I think piggybacking on Tom's idea of a day use permit, yeah. I think I have at different times kind of priced out the idea of getting a permit for my employees. We do quite a complicated car shuffle to get people in and out for their shifts. It's just not something that we can afford right now. So if there was a permit that was a lower level that was available to downtown businesses for as something that either the employee could purchase as a downtown user or the business could purchase on behalf of the employee. But it obviously would have to be pretty affordable. And then I don't know, in terms of like how far people are willing to walk, because like from my area, there's free parking on MAC, 2-hour parking that's pretty walkable. That's almost as close as the Charles Garage. So I'm probably not going to get a good, heel click proposing that to my people. I'd probably just be like, no thanks, I'll take the bus. But I do think, that is something that I've heard from other downtown business owners is that employee parking is a problem and that the permits are too expensive. So I don't know if we could do like maybe a little kind of survey of downtown businesses to ask them, at what price point would that be attractive? And do they think that, either they would assume that cost on behalf of their employees or that their employees would be interested for convenience. And then, if we might not be able to afford to give it to them for that price because nobody has any money right now. But I think that is something that could be explored.
Yeah, I do think it's a great idea. So thank you, honestly.
For a survey, that's something we could work with the downtown management board and get some sort of a survey put together.
Great. Other council members, comments on this?
I was wondering how short of quorum were you guys for that meeting? One. Thank you.
Just you, Dana.
Well, no, we were one, but then we also had someone leave. So really, ultimately, we were two.
Okay. Yeah, I unfortunately missed it because I had something I pre-committed to, and then I couldn't get out of it.
I think your invitation came late too. I think there was a mix-up for who the new liaison was for the parking task force. So our apologies on that end. So
thank you.
Dana, the other person that couldn't make it was the chair, so don't feel bad.
I look forward to getting the new date though, and making sure I come because this is important. And I just want to say, and it might not be widely supported, but Mayor Pro Tem also brought to mind income-based permits. Like some people, people get paid different amounts that live and work downtown, and just everybody being able to afford to, park for their doggone job is nice.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's fair. If you have a conversation where, if you're somebody that works in our downtown is supporting one of our businesses, right? Making minimum wage versus, a management salary. I mean, maybe that's something fairly progressive that we could put in place. I don't know. This is creative ideas time, right? It's discussion only meetings. That's the point, right? I think that's valid.
Thanks. And my other question was the upper level permit idea. Do we have that going on anywhere else in East Lansing?
The upper levels are less expensive permits in the garages because it's more inconvenient to get to them. So you drive, there's a second set of gates on the upper levels. And then we also sell lower level permits at more of a premium rate. It's $25 more expensive per month for the lower level permits. But we have permits available in all facilities. The reason we were thinking about division garage is that it has the most permits available of all the facilities. So it's the most underutilized right now. Then to not take away more spaces on the lower levels for businesses and customers to then push a discount of the upper level permits at maybe 50% or something like that from the $90 it's currently priced at, maybe to $45. Do it on a pilot trial basis for 6 months. See if it just shoots ourselves in the foot and takes people from other facilities, or if it brings us in some additional parkers.
And just to echo Mayor's point about the presentation not being available, it's so helpful for me to be able to see it and just visually and process the numbers. So I hope we can get it posted sometime soon. Thank you.
Councilmember Bacon. Go ahead.
Are the lower altitude permits called lower level permits?
The lower level ones are the more premium ones that are on the lowest levels of the facilities. Yeah.
I just let you lawyer your way into that one. That's from my sales brain. Actually, gives me a headache.
We did a few years ago. We changed the permits. We just called them parking permits, monthly parking permits before. Now we call them discount monthly parking permits because, in all actuality, based on the hourly rates, they're 65% off of the daily hourly rate. So it is currently a discount to have a permit, but it still adds up to a lot of money if somebody is coming in to work a minimum wage job. So understood.
I get what you're saying, though. I think maybe we should call it the lower elevation permit.
Premier.
Yeah. I have one final question. I'm not going to say it's the final question. I could talk about parking all night. It might be my penultimate question. And I have to kind of I have to preface this by saying that this would be of direct financial benefit to my business. But could we look at the validation rate? I think currently businesses are paying a 40% discount for validation tickets. And I guess, it would have to, somebody with a much more complicated math brain than I would have to decide, where, if we could afford to discount that further in order to have more businesses use them, would that be a gain or would that be a loss? And I don't know, I don't know if a further 10% reduction, bringing it down to 50% would actually, I don't know how much that would cost us. I don't know if it would make it affordable for people. I have found it very convenient to validate parking for my customers, and I plan to continue to do so. But I also have very few customers compared to like a restaurant, like a restaurant at full capacity serving 20 tables an hour is going to have a much greater burden. Hopefully they'll be making more money as well. But, so for me, it's a very small amount of money, but that really steep decline in validation rates made me think maybe we could adjust our rate a little bit. I mean, obviously we can't adjust it to where we're losing more than we are now, but.
Yeah, if I recall, I took over in 2015 as administrator. I think it was between 5 and 10 years ago, it was 25%. And then we upped it to 40%. And we can definitely look at those numbers and see what 50% looks like, for example.
Thanks. That was my last question. I don't have any more.
Anybody else with anything on this? Great. Thank you guys for being here. Obviously, this paints an interesting picture for us. A lot of challenges coming up. Yeah, just open to hearing, unique ideas. I think some of the ideas that are proposed here are really great. And I hope they at least got some guidance from some of the questions that we were asking here today. Thanks.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Our next item on our agenda is 5.3 racism as a public health crisis resolution. This is Elaine Hardy. Thank you for joining us, Elaine.
Ready to talk. There, I think am I live now?
You are all good.
Good. I was having some technical difficulty. Thank you so much for having me this evening. I want to talk to you about the draft resolution that's before you. It is a resolution declaring racism as a public health crisis. This resolution was done in collaboration with our HRC and Councilmember Watson. It was a result of the national conversation and the national consciousness raising with the murder of George Floyd and the conversation that we are having around race in our country right now. This resolution also speaks to the effects of systemic racism on Black and Brown communities, and particularly calls out the current situation that we are in with COVID-19 and its effect on Black communities, Black and Brown communities, and Black Americans. So what this resolution does is it acknowledges the effects of systemic racism, and it goes on to address some structural ways in which council and the city will address those issues in our community. It follows communities across the nation who have begun to declare racism a public health crisis. We have saw this happen at our county level with Ingham County. And as far as I know, there is no current resolution from any other municipality locally that talks about racism as a public health crisis in the same way that this resolution does. We are looking at this resolution as a part of the process that we are going through as a city organization to realign our culture to one that is anti-racist and that is fully inclusive. And so this declaration of racism as a public health crisis is another step towards us making that journey as a city. And so I would like to invite Councilmember Watson if she has any other information to share regarding this resolution. And then we can certainly have discussion about it. But if there's, otherwise no discussion, then what I would like to is to have this draft be placed on the agenda for next week for approval.
Councilor Watson, go ahead.
Yeah, when we met, when it was Chairperson Grisby and Elaine and I just wanted to let you guys know that we also looked at other resolutions that had been drafted by other groups around racism as a public health crisis. And my only other comment is the font. Do the fonts mean something different, Elaine, with regard to like the HRC editions or?
The document that you have before you, the ones that are italicized were the recommendations from the HRC. And those were the ones that we had significant discussion with regard to including those in this particular resolution. So yes, that's the reason why the fonts are different.
Thank you. And during our discussion, there were no changes made to what the HRC added. Just so that you all know, we wanted to, and Chair Grisby wanted to make sure it was presented to you guys without any changes or deletions from the HRC.
I just do want to add that this is a pretty comprehensive document, and it is a long resolution. It does commit us to some action, which for me as a advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion, that's important. The City Council has been, I think, pretty bold in some of the steps that they've taken, particularly with the ordinance change, with weaponizing the police, the support that you've given the city manager to take the full city staff through this cultural realignment, to change us to an anti-racist city organization. And so I didn't want to have a resolution that was just performative, but really spoke to the bold steps that you have been taking. So that's what this document, I hope, conveys.
Go ahead.
I found this very moving. It's hard sometimes when you adopt resolutions like this because of the structure of the language, the whereas clauses, and the kind of the formality of it. can sometimes serve to kind of separate you from the message of the resolution. And I found this one to be very emotional to read. I had one nitpicky comment, which is on page 2 in the second to the last whereas clause on that page. It uses the phrase African Americans, and everywhere else in this, it's referred to as Black with a capital B. And I wasn't sure if that was deliberate or if that was something that might want to be changed so that it's consistent with the rest of the document. And then in the now therefore be it resolved clauses, number 11, the conducting an annual review, which I think is a great idea. I love building in some accountability to this because I think sometimes, unfortunately, just with packed schedules and complicated things get forgotten. We've certainly passed Day of Recognition resolutions after the day has passed because we kind of missed it because we were so busy. If we could add to that clause a presentation to council following up on that annual review so that we can see what's happened, but also so that we can share with our community the work that has been done. I would appreciate that. But otherwise, I thought that this was everything I could hope for. I know that there was some anxiety in our community about the time that it took to draft this, but I think it was worthwhile.
Yeah, those are great points of presentation too. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you.
Other comments? I have a couple of it. Okay. Elaine, Councilmember Watson, thank you guys for your work on this. Chair Grigsby and other folks that had a hand in it. I appreciate the effort here. I want to touch on one item under the therefore be resolved, and it's item number 4. Promote equity through all policies approved by the East Lansing City Council, and enhance educational efforts at understanding, addressing, and dismantling racism and how it affects delivery of human and social services, economic development, and public safety. So, as probably a lot of you know, I was on the HRC before I was on council, and when I was on the HRC a while ago, I had a vision for what I wanted to see the HRC become. And one of the aspects of the HRC that I really wanted to see happen was them really being a voice for equity within our own policy. And the reason why I had that vision is because I believe myself to be an equitable person who strives to do the right thing in situations that I can control. And I think that most folks in this council would agree with that as well. But thinking about things through an equity lens is something, it takes work, it takes effort. It's not something that just happens. And so my vision for the HRC in a really, I hope in a bold way, was to have them be a resource for us to say, when we're passing policy, what does this mean in terms of equity for our city? And so I wanted to touch on point number 4, because if this is on our agenda and it passes through, I think that's something that we need to work towards. We don't always know what's going to be on our city council agenda a month in advance, right? But if there are things that are coming down the pipeline that we say, you know what, I think we need a different lens to this. The same way that we have the Transportation Commission look at items, in the same way that we have the Planning Commission look at items, I want to have our Human Rights Commission look at them through an equity lens. So that way we have a full picture. I think that's helpful. I think that not only will it intentionally address issues of equity, but it'll put equity in the conversation where equity has not been before. And I think that's important. And so that's the one point I wanted to make on this. Elaine, I think it's incredible. And I thank Councilmember Watson as well for her work and just everybody that put the effort in there. But I did want to make that point because I think that is important. That when we're talking about all policies approved by the East Lansing City Council, I try to take myself out of the vote and look at it from a holistic perspective, but I don't always do that. And I'm not always going to do that. And I'm not always going to be on the city council either. So I think that having that voice there that's constantly striving for the most equitable practice is a good thing. So That's my point. But I am very much in support of having this on our next agenda. Councilmember Bacon.
I think as well with having Elaine in her department dedicated to DE&I. I mean, quite frankly, on most subjects, ask a Black person. It's really not real complicated. Sure. Have you run it past anyone? It's not even a additional bureaucracy. So I think having even in place the group of DE&I to run things through and ask them to report, I think because the lens of what's being worked on through even HRC or human rights may be shifting with the landscape of the country. I think Elaine's department will be in the same place and aligned with the city, which is really what kind of matters, is what we can do policy related. And that's always what I'm going to come back to, more than feelings or anything else. What can we do with policy? So I would just think that'd be a good way to definitely reference what things from the HRC, but wouldn't do anything related to human rights or diversity, equity, inclusion without, running it through the lens of an entire department dedicated to, being current. So.
Yes, agree 100%. And I trust Elaine's word over mine most days. So I would, I would definitely agree with that. Yeah. So any other questions, comments on this item?
I'll have a comment just for the record that I'm just really proud of this here, and I think it needs to be a big deal made out of it. I really want to see. I meeting with Dana, and I met with Jesse this week and talked a little bit, and I talked with you quite a bit, and I like to see the way people interpret or view East Lansing be different. It really doesn't matter how many machinations and things we do within council if they're not expressed broadly in broader Lansing and in the region, that we are welcoming, that we are inclusive, that we are doing these things. I think we're maybe patting ourselves on the back. Just a way to disseminate more broadly and let people know we are inviting and we are making these changes. And if we have been perceived a certain way, this is a new time. I don't know how we really do that, because we have some perceptions out there about East Lansing that aren't that great to all the people who are being referenced in this document. So I don't know what we do beyond that, but I'd love to see people view us a little bit different in the broader community based on these types of decisions and actions going forward. So whatever we can do to broadcast and increase the volume around that, I'd love to explore that more. So. Absolutely.
Fully agree.
I did want to say, Elaine, that it was a pleasure working with you. It was before my appointment that the city of East Lansing decided to have a DEI administrator. And I always thought it was so progressive, and enjoyed that I live here in East Lansing, and so proud. So thank you for working with me, and thank you for all of your work into creating this resolution.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Go ahead, Councilor Rebecca.
Thank you. I think, as Councilmember Watson said, this is one of those things that makes East Lansing a particularly special place to live and great. And Ms. Hardy, I think the world of you. I think I've told you that, but I can't tell you that often enough. And for Councilmember Bacon, we just keep taking steps, right? And actions speak louder than words. So we keep taking steps, we keep moving forward. A lot of those beliefs or experiences have been ingrained for a long time. And we've made a commitment as a council and as a city, as an organization, to move forward. But everything we do, while important, it just takes time. My people are still upset about the potato famine. It's been, close to 200 years. So, but those things that get ingrained in you, we have to keep showing. We have to keep showing. We have to keep working. And it's really an honor to be part of a group that is committed to that. So thank you. And our mayor, thanks.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
George was really smart to hire me.
Yeah.
Well played.
I mean, hey, man, if he made one good
I
decision.
get credit for that one. Hey, come on. Thanks, Elaine.
No, great.
You're doing a great job.
It's an honor to be part of this group. It really is. Thank you. I would request this be on our next agenda if I have other council member support for that. Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much, Elaine. For being here. Okay, so the next item, not necessarily on our agenda right now, but from before, is that I am going to, and sorry, Mr. Homier, do I make the request or do I make a motion to enter closed session?
So there needs to be a motion, support, and a roll call vote. Has to pass by 2/3 majority.
Okay, so I'm going to make a motion to enter closed session to discuss a written confidential legal opinion with the city attorney pursuant to MCL 15.268 H. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Okay, seconded by Councilmember Bacon. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Babcock,
Yes.
Councilmember Bacon,
Yes.
Councilmember Watson,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Greg,
Yes.
Mayor Stevens.
Yes. And for folks that are watching, go ahead.
I just want to confirm, are we going to be coming back to this meeting to adjourn the meeting, or are we just going to address that?
That was exactly what I was about to say. For folks that are watching the meeting right now, we will be leaving this Zoom call, but then coming back to end the council meeting. From here, no further action will be taken this time, but we will be headed to closed session, and we will come out to end the meeting as necessary. So, other council members, you should see another Zoom invite in your email that was sent out a little while ago. So thank you, everybody, and we'll be back here in a little bit. Hello, all. Waiting for everybody. Okay, I'll make a motion to exit closed session or resume our open session. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, seconded by Councilmember Bacon. I'll call the roll on this. Councilmember Bacon?
Yes.
Councilmember Babcock?
Yes.
Councilmember Watson?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Gregg?
Yes.
Mayor Stevens? Yes. Now we are back into open session, and that was our last item. Thank you, everybody, for sticking with us. We are now adjourned.